You're tuned in to RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's Reveler Sports.
4 seconds left. In front. Happy moment. The Tampa Bay Lightning have won the first Stanley Cup. And the Tampa Bay Lightning have won the Stanley Cup. Lightning strikes twice. The Tampa Bay Lightning win their second straight Stanley Cup.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to RBLR Lightning. As always, my name is Jake Richter. Alongside me, it's Jose Mataro, Matt Gannon. Guys, welcome back to the show. 63 days until opening night as of this recording. That countdown, we're finally, getting closer and closer. We're actually doing the countdown now, and I've got to say I am so excited for hockey season. I am ready for it to be back. I don't know about you guys, but this offseason has felt extremely slow. But first and foremost, guys, how you doing today?
Well, 63 days till, the Lightning start playing. I also like to look at that countdown as like days until we have a little bit of cooler weather. I mean, the feels like it was 115 degrees today. I swear it felt even hotter being outside for the majority of it. So yeah, can't wait for October. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing terrific. Like you're saying, Joe, with the weather going on, me and my partner at work, we've got all these projects planned, and we say, let's wait till November to start on all these. We work outside. It's just too hot for anything. It's been kind of a boring off season so far, but for the first time in what seems like what has been months, we have some news to talk about a little bit, at least not regarding the Lightning, but something in the league has happened, which is just shaking the earth.
Yeah, we're going to get to look around the league and check out what some other teams have been doing, and maybe are some of these teams a bigger threat to the Lightning this year? Is it a concern? Because a lot of people have the Lightning projected as missing the playoffs as their hot take, which I think is crazy, but we'll get to that later. First, before we start the episode, I do want to remind you guys, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes, or if you missed any of our older off-season videos, you can be sure to go check those out as well. But most importantly, we have been nominated as one of the finalists for Best Podcast on Creative Loafing. So if you guys could do us a massive favor, if you're enjoying the content over here, you can head over to creativeloafing.com. That in the description, and if you sign in and then you head over to the entertainment section, if you go to the browse in the top right, scroll all the way down, there's an entertainment section, and you can go find Best Podcast and put in a vote for RBLR. We would really appreciate it if you guys are enjoying the content out here for all the Lightning, the Rays, the Bucks, the Rowdies, and the amazing things that everybody has done here, and for our producer Eureka, who puts in so much work to put out the best possible content for you guys. So links in the description. Head over there and send out a vote for us if you can.
It's pretty cool. I mean, because we asked for some help a few weeks ago just to get through the nomination process, and if you guys showed up and helped us get to the next phase. So please send in those votes. We really appreciate it.
That's a great point. Yes, thank you to everybody who did go and nominate us for just to get to the final rounds. Now we just need you one more time to help us win the best podcast. But with that said, let's get into some Lightning hockey. And we do have a little bit of news to talk about. I don't know if it's really qualifies as news, but Sergachev was making the rounds over the last couple of days because a quote came out about Sergachev, and it said, quote, "Wow, Toronto wins one series in 19 years and then immediately loses. They deserve no credit. No other team would celebrate such a thing." And that was based off a reporter. This happened in Russian, and it was translated, and that was the quote that came out. And, of course, it kind of took the NHL by storm quickly. A lot of people picking it up, going crazy. Wow, I can't believe Sergachev said that about the Leafs. They won their first series in forever. And then Lightning fans, of course, were absolutely loving it, saying Sergachev is telling them like it is. What a great quote. And then Sergachev came out on his Instagram page and had to kind of back things up and say, no, that quote was misquoted. It was not translated properly. I'll read you exactly what he said. He said, "LOL, if you don't speak Russian, don't use Google Translate as your first option and then spread misinformation. I never said it like that." So here's the transcript of what he says he actually said. It was, quote, "Toronto played very physical which got a couple of your is that true? That's what the reporter said. And then Sergachev responded, no, it just happens sometimes. People get hurt by accident. I don't want to give them credit. Then the reporter followed up about asking for credit or not giving them credit. And he said, well, I don't think they deserve it. And the reporter reminded him about winning the first round in 19 years. And then Sergachev said, that's true. Good on them. But I don't think getting through this, they didn't get through the second round. I don't see a reason to celebrate. So similar to what was put out on the quote there, but not quite the same. I know I rambled on there for a little bit there. Joe, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on this Sergachev quote and misquote here?
I mean, when I first saw the initial misquote, I think I even put it in our little chat. I was like, savage. He absolutely, nailed what a lot of people were saying on the head. And the next thing was thinking, obviously, flashbacks to drunken Cooch after winning the Stanley Cup and his comments on Montreal and how, the Canadian fan base must have Tampa as their number one most hated team in the entire NHL.
Yeah, I really love this. Everybody in the league, all the fans, they beg their players to show a little bit of personality, a little bit of grit off the ice, if you will. And when you have quotes like Cooch and quotes like Sergachev, misquotes, if you will, I like seeing it. Of course, I'm biased. Of course, I like seeing Sergachev, clap back at Toronto. And tell me, did he lie? Did he say one lie in that whatsoever? I don't think he did. And again, I know a little bit literally gets lost in translation, but the message was still kind of the same. I think he was telling the straight up truth, but I gotta say, the best part about his clapback, his response about the quote, was to end his Instagram story with him, Vazzy, and Cooch with the Stanley Cup and the Conn Smythe and the boat parade. That was the best way to end that argument. I mean, is there any way to come back from that? Because I don't think there is. Not.
I was saying it at the end of the series. It's it hurts that the Lightning lost in the first round, but that was the Stanley Cup for Toronto Maple Leafs fans, and that's embarrassing. And then what transpired afterwards is even more embarrassing. But someone's got to be salty, right? And it might as well be the worst fan base in the league.
Well, we're throwing shots out here on the podcast as well.
If anything, though, I'm consistent. All right, I've been consistent through it all. Toronto's a joke of a market for the majority of their fans. They can't even hold their GM in check.
I mean, I don't 100% disagree with you, but I maybe take a little bit of a different, nicer approach. But I love it, Joe. I look at this more from the reporter side, and it really is frustrating, because someone who wants to work in this field, obviously, and be covering the great game of hockey, can't misquote people like this. And I mean, the quote wasn't actually that far off. I felt like, I think the biggest thing they did was kind of squish together they took what him saying, not giving credit for the injuries and not giving credit for winning. They kind of pushed that together. But Sergachev also showed some people in his DMs saying just stupid stuff to him. And that's what happens when there's you're going to have that regardless, no matter what, when it comes to a player like that. But this kid's 24 years old. And that is just terrible to see stuff like that happen. And as reporters, I mean, you should absolutely be checking your sources and make sure you're quoting someone right. I mean, it's literally the easiest thing to do. But as Sergachev said, check your sources and get an actual Russian person to translate it. But I know Lightning fans did enjoy it just like you, Joe, because I know all the Twitter pages, all the Facebook groups, people were absolutely loving the quote. And he is now up there with Kucherov from his drunken charades too, talking about other teams as well. So the rivalry this year should be a lot of fun as we continue into the season against Toronto. Do we get a fight between Sergachev and one of the Toronto players this year?
Oh,
I'm all for it.
I hope so.
I wish Bunting was still on the team because I am a closet Carolina fan, so it's going to be hard for me to cheer for Carolina with him on their team. I wish he was still on the team because I'd love to see Sergey go after him or even Chernak go after him. But it's going to be a blood feud this year. I'm definitely going to at least one home game against Toronto because I know there's going to be a bit of a bloodbath. I'd love to see Tanner Jeannot take somebody on, especially after they lost a little bit of grit in the offseason. they added a few new pieces, but I still think it's going to be a bloodbath.
Well, if you want to talk about adding grit, you know that they added Reeves over in Toronto. So
That's true.
if you want a good fight, I mean that's the basically the title bout right there for heavyweights. Won't it be for the league? Janot versus Reeves.
And they've gone at each other before. I think I know at least once, and it's the fight I'm remembering. It was a very, very close fight, but Reeves did get he got the edge on him. I'd be happy to see round 2 and both of them in different colors.
I want to switch to a little more positive note before we get into some changes that are going on around the league, and that's the series that the Lightning have been doing called Bolts Beginnings. If you guys haven't seen, they released an episode with Hedman and Nick Paul. They're now out there filming even more of these, and they were with Brandon Hagel not too long ago. They are now with Eric Chernak. I don't know how many more they're planning on doing this season, but I just wanted to bring attention to it because I think it's something that's really cool, and I really enjoyed checking those out. And I wanted to pass the question off to you guys. Matt, I'll start with you. Are there any players that you would hope to see the Lightning go and talk to for this Bolts Beginning series?
That's a good one. We do have a lot of great personalities. Like I'm staying on topic, I suppose would be Sergachev. I feel like he's got a very, very interesting life off the ice, especially with what he's been doing this offseason as well. He's been doing his training camp for the younger players. I forgive me, I can't remember what it's called, but his whole Young Guns training camp thing, and he is kind of, with the departure of Alex Killorn on the team, so I'd love to follow him around. But I do have to throw one thing in here with the Brandon Hagel. I don't think that one's been released yet, but as a fellow forklift certified man myself, seeing him being able to drive a forklift, that was great, man. I had to throw that in there.
Do they release that episode when he signs his new contract? Is that when that one comes out?
I pray.
That's funny. Fellow heavy machinery sort of guy there. In terms of finding some other people, Vasi would be an interesting one. He just got a motorcycle that you see all over Instagram. But I'm gonna go with one of your favorite, Matt, and I'd really like to see Bogo. I'd like to see some of his background, because I know he kind of came up, grew up as more of an outdoorsy, like a woodsy type, very dissimilar to a lot of other players who have come up in the league. And I think that would be nice to see a good old boy and his upbringing. I think that'd be pretty fun.
And while we're on that too, I do have to give a shout out to a new member of the Bolts, Josh Archibald. He's a very outdoorsy style of guy himself. He's big into hunting and guns and cars and boats and all that. That's right up my alley. So that's of course, I'd like to see our OG guys, the guys that have been with the team for a while. But since he brought that up, I figured I'd shoehorn that in there as well. He's the kind of guy who I think would also have an interesting, who would be interesting to follow around, see where he grew up, where he got that kind of passion from. Again, that's just kind of my interests, but I think that'd be another good candidate. Jake, how about yourself?
I'm excited about Hagel because he obviously quickly became one of my favorite players on the Lightning, and I'm excited about his. As for other players that I maybe want to see, Joe, you mentioned Vasilevsky. I think he'd be really, just the whole Russian aspect. I think any of those, right, Kucherov, Sergachev, or Vasi would be a really fun one to do. So I'd probably go with Vasilevsky as one of the other guys that I'd want to see. Stamkos would be another great one too, just because he's the captain. And you always want to learn about guys like that who have so much respect for and are so involved with this franchise. I just love this whole series though, because it's awesome to see Bolts hockey, everywhere in the world and how it all intertwines. And the best part is our listeners right at home, they can support the Lightning wherever they may be by heading over to shop.RBLR Sports and checking out the awesome inspired merch that we have from all of the teams, not just the Lightning, the Rays, the Rowdies, the Bucks. And we've got an exclusive code just for you guys. You guys can use code BOLTS to get 10% off of your order. So be sure to head and check out the link down in the description. After you go and vote for best podcast, you can head over to the to our merch store and check out the Awesome Inspired merch and pick some up there as well. So, all right, let's get into
Eureka with the quick fingers in there, just like popping the ads.
It's more impressive than the transition.
Let's get into what's been going on around the division. We've had a lot of changes, even though this offseason has really just felt so slow and different. There's been a lot of changes, as I mentioned. Joe, I'll start with you on this one. Let's start. Do you think that there is a team that's a bigger threat this year than they were last year to the Lightning in the race for that division title?
I mean, really, I feel like it's kind of the same teams. You're going to have Toronto and Boston as your main competitors. Florida made a couple of moves that pretty much saw them stay similar. I think in terms of overall skill, in my opinion. So they'll be there too. But it's a lot of moves. I'm looking at my sheet here, by Boston that I kind of like what they've done in the off season.
I don't know. I kind of disagree with that. I think there's some other threats in the East or in the Atlantic that I wouldn't put Boston in there. I know I doubted them last year. I thought they weren't going to be a playoff team. I thought they'd aged out. This year, I'm doubling down on that. Of course, I was completely wrong last year with a record-setting regular season. Didn't go far in the playoffs.
To clarify, I don't think they're going to be as good as a team as last year. They're not going to have the same record, but I still think they're going to be, someone that really contend with.
Honestly, I'd be putting them, if not in the playoffs, probably a wild card team. I think all the non-playoff teams in the East or in the Atlantic have gotten better, and I think all the playoff teams have gotten worse. And I hesitate, but I think I will throw the Lightning in there. Not that they've gotten much worse, but losing Bergeron and most likely Krejci, having your number one center be Pavel Zacha, who's a very still unproven player. Like, yeah, he had a solid 50-something points last year, but that's your number one center. Of course, you've got two elite wingers with Pasternak and Marchand. I just don't see them catching the same kind of lightning in a bottle and just taking the whole league by storm. I think Ullmark had a good year. Can he replicate it? I don't think so. I don't think they're going to be the biggest threat in the league, and I think Toronto may have lost a step as well. I don't think anybody's going to be a true, real threat this year, and of course, I don't think the Lightning are going to be chasing that division title as well, but I think the playing field has definitely been evened out in the Atlantic. And if there's one team that I do think can be a new threat, I guess not a complete division winning threat, but a new threat is, of course, the Buffalo Sabres. You guys know that as well. I'm a closet Sabres fan. You guys know how I feel about Tage and a lot of their other young players like Jack Quinn and JJ Peterka. They've got a really, really good lineup, and Dylan Cousins as well. I can go on and on and on, especially when you've got a guy like Dan Girardi who's kind of running the defense back there as well. Off the ice, he's one of the associate coaches. I think they're going to be a playoff team this year. They might not be contending for first in the division or anything, but that's a team that I think could be a sneaky competitor for all the Atlantic teams, all the top four teams in the Atlantic. Of course, you could throw Detroit in there. You could throw Ottawa in there. I'd put Ottawa ahead of Detroit, but I think Buffalo is going to be one to kind of watch out for. I think they're putting the pieces together for the first time in a while. They will be a bit of a sneaky threat.
So, Matt, you go with Buffalo as one of your sneaky picks. I'm going with Detroit just because I think they've been a very young team for the past couple of years. And anytime you got a guy like Steve Yzerman who helped build who the Lightning are, you got to watch out for him. He knows what he's doing. He's added a lot of young pieces. And I think that they maybe not this year. They might still take a couple of years to really get up there, but they were almost a playoff team this year. But unfortunately, they took that downturn right before the trade deadline, and then they came back up a little bit, and they weren't able to quite figure out where they sat when it came to, are they a playoff team this year? But I think if they can get a couple of pieces to step up this year and then make some moves at the trade deadline, I would not be surprised to see Detroit make a run. Honestly, a lot of the Atlantic Division, I think, is better on paper. And that's the key word there, though, on paper, right? Everybody thought Boston was going to miss the playoffs last year. They came out and, like you said, Matt, cut lightning in a bottle. We're the best teams in the NHL. The thing with me for Boston is I'm really most curious, are they going to take a somewhat of a Lightning approach? Now, they didn't get swept in the first round like the Lightning did, but are they going to learn their lesson like the Lightning did and be like, okay, we do not need to compete for the top. We need to take our time and make sure we are fully ready to go. The Lightning went on to win back-to-back Stanley Cups. I sure hope that's not the case, and the Lightning are able to take them down and send them out of the playoffs. But I'd be curious to see how much Boston has learned. But they've lost some big pieces, no question about that. I mean, Bergeron, 19 seasons over there with Boston. That's a big loss for them, and I think it's going to affect them, especially at center. And their center depth is not the same. There's a former Bolt over there on Boston now, and Kevin Shattenkirk, who joined them defensively. So it'll be interesting to see him again after he was playing with Anaheim. We didn't get to see him that much playing against the Lightning. But for me, guys, you can sit here and say this team got better, this team got worse, but to me, it only matters what the Lightning do. And I may know that kind of be like a cliche answer, but I think that the Lightning have actually, I mean, maybe on paper they've gotten a little worse, but I really don't think they've taken that much of a downturn. I really like the additions that they made. I'm specifically high on Connor Sherry. I'm excited to see what he can do, but I think the Lightning made some great moves to kind of round out that bottom six. They've still got their great core, and I don't think it really matters what any team does in this division. I think the Lightning can absolutely compete with any of these guys. I think they can easily fit into a playoff spot and make another run at a cup again this year.
You know,
too many people. Go ahead, Joe.
I was gonna say I'm getting tired of the conversation, but it has to be brought up every single year. That are the Lightning getting too old? Are they starting to come out of their prime? And I know it gets exhausting saying the exact same thing year after year, and we get proven pretty much wrong that the team's good to go. But you got to figure at some point you're going to start seeing slumps out of Stamkos. Maybe not quite yet for Kucherov, but maybe Hedman losing a step sometime in the next couple of years. That's assuming that doesn't happen. I completely agree with you, Jake, that the Lightning are still a huge threat, and if they take care of their end of things, everything else will kind of work out. They've got the skill set to be able to do it, and of course they definitely have the pedigree as well.
It's a good thing I let you go first, Joe, because you pretty much said exactly what I was going to say. I get a lot of people and a lot of opposing fans are down on the Lightning, but all of the most important pieces are still here. Again, the core 7, if you want to call it that. Teams have their core 3 or 2 or 4. We have the core 7. So I'm not at all worried. We have position.
Andre Vasilevsky.
We have every single position covered, even off the ice when it comes to coaching. We have the best coach in not just the National Hockey League, but all of the big 4 sports in the U.S. Argue a wall. I'm not going to listen. It's John Cooper. He's the best. At every position, we have a top 3, if not top player. Going from Kucherov, he's the best winger. Braden Point, he's one of the best centers in the league. Victor Hedman and Mikhail Sergachev are 2 of the best defensemen in the league, and the undisputed still brick wall of a goalie in Andre Vasilevsky.
And he's going to have a bounce back year too. Watch.
He absolutely will. And another candidate I have for a bounce back as well, might be a bit of a hot take, is Victor Hedman. I know you said he might lose a step. I don't know how you actually feel about it, but I think Victor Hedman is going to respond rather well this year. I know Sergachev is kind of, knocking at the doorstep, kind of wanting to steal that number 1 defenseman job. And I know they get along. I know they're friends and teammates and have been for years now. But I think a bit of a healthy competition will both push each other to excel. How do you get, how does Victor Hedman get any better? How does Sergachev get any better? But I do think Victor Hedman is going to be a huge candidate for a bounce back season. I know he's unimpressed with how his season went along. He was battling some injuries as well, so I do think I kind of am going off on a tangent here. But Hedman, he's definitely going to bounce back.
As I say, stick with it. What did he have done? My memory's fading me over the summer.
What, like injury wise or surgery? I don't know off the top of my head, but I know he had been battling for pretty much a couple of seasons now, lower body injuries. I remember, he's got hard and heavy miles on him. But it seems like he quite literally did lose a step this year. He wasn't as fast. He kind of wasn't in the greatest position. He didn't put himself in the best positions. I just think it was a fluke one-off year. When you are the top of the top for 3 or 4 years, the undisputed best defenseman until guys like Cale Makar came into the league and Adam Fox came into the league, I don't think you lose that ability that fast, that rapidly. I think it is kind of a one-off year, or if anything, it might just be a slight gradual downgrade. Because again, he's only 32 or something. Like, he's on the right side of 30, which is a good thing. I think he still has time to resurrect his career. Is such the wrong word, you know. It's like I'm pushing the big red button here. It's not at all. But I do consider him a very, very strong candidate for a bounce back.
Yeah, I'm guessing that he'll have one of those off seasons that he trains really hard and comes back with a vengeance. I know he's injured at some point during the beginning portion of the year where Sergachev started to kind of take over a little bit, and it probably did plague him throughout the majority of the season with a little bit of extra time off this postseason. I mean, again, another guy I think is gonna. You're right. He's gonna have a bounce back and play really well. And then defensively, we're looking a lot better. Just from those two guys with Vassie and Hedman playing a better game, and they're not too old to continue improving.
You want to talk about guys training hard in the offseason. Look at Nikita Kucherov. And Chris Kren just did the article on Kucherov and how he's literally out there almost every single day. He was out there almost right after the season ended. He didn't take much of a break like a lot of guys did because he wants to be the best. And there's a reason he's one of the best forwards out there. And he's another guy that could come out and have a really explosive season again. I mean, he has an explosive season every single year. But he's out there training hard. And I know he was still practicing with Killorn. It was a really weird picture. I don't know if you guys saw. It was Kucherov and Killorn together, but Kucherov in his Lightning jersey or Lightning practice jersey and Killorn in his Ducks practice jersey. But the guys were still practicing together. I don't know. I guess Killorn has not made his trek out there to Anaheim quite yet, but Kucherov is another one. Now, Matt, you mentioned Archibald, and he did Ask Me Anything with the Lightning, and he actually talked about how he's really excited to play with some of the best players and one of the best coaches. Of course, he said one of the best coaches because it's politically correct, but he mentioned John Cooper as well. And speaking of the Penguins, there's another former Bull that is on the move. So for your immaculate grid players, Ruta's starting to make the rounds, and he's a good one to use in that. But he was traded in a much bigger trade for the Pittsburgh Penguins as they acquired none other than Erik Karlsson, which a lot of people, that was the move, Matt, you referred to earlier before we started the show. And it's not in our division, but it is in the Eastern Conference. The Lightning do play the Penguins a couple of times. And it's a big move for them, especially because they have the former Toronto GM who is trying to make a name for himself after having such a rough time in Toronto. But he's trying to make a splash quickly here. Matt, what are your thoughts on this move by Pittsburgh?
Honestly, I can't find out who the winner of this trade is. I know a lot of people were didn't think Mike Greer, the Sharks GM, did a great job on his return. But I do think he did a great job of getting rid of a huge salary off of his cap. They're retaining $1.5 million a year for another 4 years, I think, maybe 3 years. I can't quite remember, but to get rid of essentially $10 million, they can finally get that rebuild or finally get on the up and up, getting rid of that boat anchor contract and getting a stable defenseman like Jan Ruda. He was somebody who I really started to like before he left. I really did turn the page on Ruda. I thought he played a lot better. So that's another good piece. I can't quite remember who else they got. I know they got a first-round pick in there. Montreal, they did a really good job on just being the third team in, retaining salary and getting assets for that. They got Jeff Petrie back and a couple of other players. They did a great job on being the third man in. And, of course, the big piece right there in Pittsburgh is Erik Karlsson. That is huge right there. Of course, he's got a really big contract, and he is he's not an old player, but he's older. He's above 30. Pittsburgh is a bit of an older team as well, but I think he could be a big help. Unfortunately, it hurts me to say that. I'm not the biggest Pittsburgh fan, but I do think it was a good trade.
Did Matt just say that he's not a big Pittsburgh fan? It's crazy to hear him say that.
Sure, I've got teams that I like. I've got teams that I hate. Pittsburgh is in that hate category, but I don't I think it's a good move, but I don't think it's going to be anything to make them back into a cup contender. Like I was saying earlier, how we've got pretty much every position covered with at least a one of the best type of players in X position. I think they've really got Sidney Crosby. They've got one of the best defensemen who's kind of a liability. They're getting slower. Goaltending is still very unproven. I think it'll be a good move for the Penguins, but I don't think it's going to be anything to push them back over the edge, to get them back into Stanley Cup contention. If anything, they'll finish, 14th instead of 18th this year. I think, again, good addition, but I don't think it's enough to really, get the job done.
I'm a little bit mixed on this myself, to be honest. On one hand, I completely understand swinging for the fences when you're getting into the twilight years of Sidney Crosby and of Malkin. I just don't know that I really understand the Carlson trade. I think I mean, you've got Chris Letang. He's somebody that basically has the same style of game, albeit not as good as Carlson, but they're both defensive liabilities. Erik Karlsson's putting up points, but his plus minus is in the trash, and it's not coincidence. He's never been a real defensive defenseman. He's always been that offensive threat, a guy that you put on your power play, you help move the puck around. It kind of honestly surprises me, and I'm going light because I already kind of trash talk Toronto quite a bit, but this GM's a moron in my opinion.
Keep going.
Kyle Dumba just signs like big names with big contracts, puts it all together and hopes it's going to work out. And that's what I think this sort of signing is. I don't think, like Matt said, I don't think this is going to work out very well for Pittsburgh in the long run. It's not what I think that the team needs. Like I said, they've already got a defenseman that can move the puck and play offensively. Adding a bunch of offensive defensemen isn't going to win you a championship. And like I said, I like the idea of going all out for Crosby in the later part of his career. I don't know. This one has me shaking my head.
I am going to play devil's advocate here, and it's going to kill me to do it, but I do think Dubas gets a bit of a worse rep than he really deserves. Like in Toronto, no, hear me out, guys. Hear me out. He was kind of a puppet in Toronto. He did Brendan Shanahan's bidding. Like, he was the president of hockey operations while Kyle Dubas was the GM. And after he left, there were 2 or 3 trades or potential trades that had got leaked that were all but finalized, but needed Brendan Shanahan's blessing to get done. One of them was a Brandon Hagel trade. One of them was, I can't quite remember, but he was very limited in his role and what he could do in Toronto. And in his first year in Toronto, he did make a big splash with, I'm not going to go completely devil's advocate here. I am going to bring up some fallacies with him, but in his first year in Toronto, he did make that huge signing for John Tavares, which now looks like a pretty rough contract. I think it might end up being like that with Erik Karlsson. I mean, that's a $10 million+ contract right there. It will not age very well, but as of right now, it could be something to help him. But when you are the main guy steering the ship, I think he might be able to, he might be able to make better moves. He might being, fully autonomous and being the guy that steers the ship and not having, the overlord above you pulling your strings. I think he might be able to make a little bit more concise moves. Now, when it comes to free agency, that's where it's an issue with Kyle Dubas. But I do think he does get a bit of a worse rep than he deserves.
Look, man, you're a sailor. You have a sailboat. If you you kind of tend to go down with the ship as the captain, right? And he left a mess in Toronto and then went over to Pittsburgh it looks like he's making a mess again. And Jake, I mean, do you notice that Matt's camera looks a little bit different
I think we might have just
Do we have
I think
an
we might have
AI?
watched him get hacked live on camera.
Is this an AI generated version of our co-host?
My chat GPT has officially taken over and has now got Matt's camera, and you might be right there, Joe. Listen, it's a big trade. I was excited of it just because it was a big trade. I'm like, oh my God, something happened in the offseason because it's felt so long. But I go back to what I was saying earlier. I don't think it really affects the Lightning, especially because it really just depends on what they can do. Listen, Pittsburgh moved on from Jan Ruda, who I thought was a really good defenseman. I did find that interesting. Ruda went and he got paid, rightfully so, and then immediately shipped out to San Jose. So he got to choose his destination and then immediately got traded after playing, one season with Pittsburgh. So short-lived down there with the Pens, but another former Bolt on the move there. Listen, Dubas, I mean, he made a mess in Toronto. There's no question about it. How he's going to do in Pittsburgh, I have no idea. I personally don't have any confidence in him. He did get the best of us at the very end over there with one series, but you give a guy 100 chances, he's odd to make one shot eventually. So
you guys are hard, man. I mean, he literally can't be worse than Brian Burke and Ron Hextall. They were the previous president and GM, and they really did sink that Pittsburgh ship. I mean, there were some awful contracts, like signing Jeff Carter to a multi-year, $1 million deal. That one was terrible, and I think I'm not sure if he's even signed, but they ran that ship pretty horribly. All I'm saying is I don't think Kyle Dubas can do a worse job. I don't think he can do a worse job in Pittsburgh than his predecessors, and I don't think he can do a worse job in Pittsburgh than he did in Toronto. That's all I'm saying. I still don't necessarily like the guy, especially after seeing him screaming at fans saying go back to Canada, got him all red in the face like that. I really don't like him. I really don't respect him. But hey, this is a biased podcast, and sometimes I got to be the unbiased one, Jake. Well, we got to maintain a little bit of credibility here.
Listen, to be fair to Pittsburgh, I mean, they've got a lot of big core talented players, Sidney Crosby, and then you got Erik Karlsson now. And then, those are the type of guys that can make a couple of plays and they could go on a run. I mean, who knows? You can speculate as much as you want about on paper talent and how a team's going to do, but you don't know until they hit the ice and you actually see them play. That is the nature of the game. I remember there was a time where Tampa was hot on the Erik Karlsson watch and whether he was going to come to the Lightning. That mostly happened because of the All-Star game and the famous photo of Karlsson and Hedman dressed up in their Gasparilla gear. But Karlsson was once a hot commodity to come down here with the Lightning, and who knows what it could have been if he was down here with us. But you're right, Joe. He is a offensive-minded defenseman, and Pittsburgh. I mean, I think they've already got a pretty decent amount of offense. You would think they'd want more of a defensive mind when it comes down there.
We'll see. I guess we'll see how it plays out. I wouldn't be surprised if he keeps his numbers up because he is playing with some real good talent. But again, if he keeps those numbers up, I think it'll have been a failed season given what his plus minus was last year.
Well, that's going to do it for us, guys, in this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're getting closer and closer to Lightning season. I promise it's right around the corner. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on those future episodes as we start to get into of it and talking about what could be coming up for the Lightning. Don't forget to head over to creativeloafing.com and vote for us for best podcast. We'll talk to you guys in the next time. Thank you so much for watching, and go Bolts.
Presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.